Welcome to Sherrie Sessions, Cutting Toxic Family Ties. My name is Dr. Sherrie Campbell, and I'm your host. I am a leading expert in the niche of toxic family abuse, and although my show cannot substitute for therapy, it is a survivor-based show. In me, you're not only going to get an expert, but you're also going to get a survivor, as I have also survived toxic family abuse. I know how hard it is. The goal I have is to give voice to the voiceless, to provide skills to help you to protect your peace, to stand your solid ground, and to navigate and heal the heartbreaks caused by toxic family. Please have a pen and paper available to give voice to your thoughts as you listen to each show. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for your bravery. So let the healing begin. Welcome back, everyone, to Sherrie Sessions, Cutting Toxic Family Ties. This is Courtney Gilmartin. She reached out to me with an interest to be on the show, and she is an expert who focuses on the problematic aspects of the family court system. And it really is a problem, so I want to bring light to it because it's a family problem. And it's not just the spouses, it involves everyone, gang ups, all the things. And unfortunately, Courtney lived through this hell herself. So Courtney, welcome to Sherrie Sessions.
Thank you so much for having me.
So tell us a little bit about you, and then we'll jump into having a great conversation on the meat of this family court problem.
I am a protective mother of two. I got divorced almost a decade ago. And when I got divorced, I kind of fell into the same, I think, school of thought as most people do when they enter family court, that I'll get divorced, the court will see what's happening. And then, I'll have custody of my kids and, kind of start my life over. But then I quickly realized that, my ex just started immediately weaponizing family court, the false allegations, the alienation claims, all of that. It's like textbook. They seem to follow a similar pattern and practice, all these toxic and abusive people. So I learned a lot. I made a lot of mistakes along the way. And towards the end of my journey, when my case really turned around, which was in 2021, which is just crazy to think that it's already 4 years ago, but it seems like it's yesterday. I realized there's a tremendous opportunity here for me to start using my voice. We hear the bad stories, and a lot of litigants are kind of discouraged from speaking out. And I do think if you're in active litigation, be very cognizant of what you're saying online. But now that my litigation's kind of closed, I'm like, I need to take this opportunity to share my learnings and turn it into a method that is sustainable and scalable for others to use.
So if you speak out publicly now, can he make an issue of this and come at you for defamation?
He's tried when I first started my advocacy, but that was pretty quickly kiboshed. That being said, there's a lot I keep close to my chest. There's so much more to this story than I could even possibly share. But the long and short of it is that I thought family court would help me and my children, and it definitely didn't. In the end, it did the right thing finally, but it took so much time, money, effort, stress, emotional damage to my kids, what they put them through. So it just shouldn't be that way, which is why I really started speaking out. I first started New Jersey Protective Moms, a nonprofit with other moms who were victims of the system. And we really focused on advocacy, awareness, and then legislation reform. But we were really proactive in our state. And we rallied some troops together to get coercive control passed. That was a battle. It was a 2-year battle, but that was signed into law in December 2024. So that was a huge step forward in New Jersey. And, now we're just continuing to network and try to get some systemic change here in the state to be able to help litigants in these protracted 10-year-long family court battles. Cause it's just not, it's honestly a waste of taxpayer resources. It's a waste of the court's time. And it's really doing a lot of damage to litigants and their children, which we just can't have going forward.
Yeah. And I just want to say, because I have male listeners as well, and I've had male clients go through this on the other side of very toxic women as well. It does go both ways. It's just whoever is the most toxic, relentless, sociopathic ex. The children are just not even thought. I've had several cases where it almost ended up feeling like the parent who was the good parent nearly lost custody of her kids to the court, not even to the ex, where these parenting coordinators get involved and there's all these child lawyers. And all of a sudden, these clients of mine are feeling like, how do I suddenly have no rights to my own children? And
Yeah.
they're 6 or they're 7, they're 9, they're under, 12, whatever, even whatever age it is. It's really traumatic. And I've learned throughout my own career that children tend to side with the parent who scares them the most. Can you dive into that a little?
Yeah. So, and I think that's something a lot of people are finally starting to realize. And, Dr. Cochiola is someone in this field who talks a lot about how kids can align with the abuser. She's a great resource too for people that are involved in this dynamic. So, a lot of times kids will just look at it more on the surface level of who has more power or who feels more powerful. So, why would I want to align with the weaker parent who may not be able to give me the things, let's say the abuser is the moneyed spouse who may not be able to provide for me the same things or take me on fun trips or do fun things, buy me the e-bike I want, whatever. Because, kids sometimes are just looking at like those materialistic or the instant gratification. And also a lot of times there's an even deeper dynamic where, the kids will see mom mistreating dad or dad mistreating mom. And they're thinking, well, why would I want to be on the other end of it? Right. We see that in kids. And I think we see that in family dynamics too. And even like external beyond that dynamic. So
Yeah.
that's definitely a huge factor.
I
And
think kids
something
are
that,
also afraid that they will be abandoned, fully abandoned by the mean parent. And that feels, because they're so young, that feels like that somehow they're betraying the parent by loving their good parent. And then that is going to make them lose that parent. They don't feel afraid to lose you, so they can move psychologically a little more toward that parent that is threatening on some covert level that child is picking up on, that, they're going to lose. Like, for example, let's say that it's your custodial time and you're the bad parent and the mom calls in. And it's like, your mom's calling. Okay. That's so covert. But now the kid's like, uh-oh, do you really want to talk to her? That kid's going to go, mm-mm. Okay. They don't have to say like, your fucking mom's calling again. Like they don't, if you talk to her, blah, blah, blah. Like that doesn't even have to happen. It's not like, oh, honey, your mom's calling. It's just can be that insidious.
yeah. And to your point, this is exactly why coercive control goes like missed so many times, right? They don't even have to say anything before the call.
Yeah.
It could be every time mom calls or dad calls afterwards, dad screams at me about my room and there's no mess, or dad won't talk to me for 2 hours, or dad slams doors, or dad takes my sister to the park and won't take me. Like they're thinking all these things. So they start to equate that behavior. Dad doesn't even have to say anything. Mom doesn't even have to say anything before it. So the kid will just not pick up the phone because they don't want to be on the other end of that nastiness afterwards.
It's interesting. There's a case, and this is a murder case, but it's Gabriel Fernandez. And I don't know if you've watched the documentary or not, but this is the first time social workers were actually taken to court to be charged with his murder. They all got off, sadly, but the more the teacher called social services, the worse Gabriel got abused. And so if we look at that example, like the kids are just trying to survive. They're not trying to betray anyone. They're just scared. And there's a really good book called The Drama of the Gifted Child, and it's ancient, but she describes how as children, we learn to shave off very essential parts of ourselves to kind of find that love and belonging and that acceptance. So if you apply all those theories to coercive control and divorce court, a lot of parents that I've treated feel betrayed by their kids. I get it, but I reframe that they're scared. You were scared of her or him as well. You changed yourself for her or him when you were married to that person as well. How could your kid not do that who's far less skilled? Right? So I just think there's so many insidious levels. And I love that you're pointing these out, right? Because people don't see them, then they don't think they're an issue.
Yeah. And I mean, I'd even go a step further with your clients. They're probably still not parenting at their full capacity or the way they want to, because when you're co-parenting, and I say
scared.
co-parenting in quotes, you can't do the things that you want to do if there's an abusive or toxic dynamic, coercive control going on, right? So like they're still operating not their true self. So you have to remind them of that, because how could their child possibly be
Oh.
their true self? And it's almost when the safe parent feels betrayed, or, you know, like their child doesn't care for them anymore, they're, preferring the abuser, it's almost a subtle form of fawning, or it is a form of fawning, right? That child is fawning on the abusive parent to try to get on their good side and show them, no, well, I love you, to try to get that nice treatment. It's all within that cycle, but all these dynamics, like you said, are so insidious. And
Mm.
it's a similar playbook, but the dynamic of each individual family system is so different. And that's why I always tell people you have to understand the larger themes and the dynamics that could be at play, and then try to identify what's going on in your family specifically. And it could change day to day, year to year, but try to get the blueprint, like the high level view of your family. It'll help a lot of people.
Yeah, that's 100% true. Just for the layperson, define fawning for us and coercive control, because these are our words, but I want to make sure the listener understands what we're saying.
So when we say coercive control, a lot of people kind of equate it with like psychological or emotional abuse. And that's part of coercive control, but coercive control is really like the ecosystem that the toxic, abusive person will create. And within that ecosystem is like the spider web of behaviors, where it's emotional abuse, psychological abuse, economic control, controlling your day-to-day life, who you talk to, where you go. And it doesn't, again, have to be explicit, like a wife saying to a husband, I don't want you to go golfing. It could be when he comes home from golfing all day, she won't talk to him. She's burnt dinner. She's ripped his clothes in the laundry and said the washing machine broke. It could be all these little subtle things. And then eventually he's just like, I don't want to go golfing anymore because she's going to do XYZ when I get back. And they start to erode away at their autonomy and their
Yeah.
self of sense. And
Mhm.
then, you become entrapped in this world that is dictated by the coercive controller. Evan Stark, who's no longer with us, but he was very progressive in coercive control. He said, it's the torture and torment between the reportable incidents, like those big blow-ups. So it'll be all the other little like minutia and really damaging, but sometimes really insidious behaviors in between those moments is the web of coercive control. And then when we go to fawn, those can be within like the category of behaviors. People will say like
Fight,
flight, fright.
flight, fear, fawn. Yeah.
Right. So fawning is more like the appeasing, um, the trying to really like regulate the other person's behaviors through being nice to them, doing acts of service, saying nice things, doing nice things, trying to really just constantly appease that person to keep, the boil in the pot from boiling over.
Yeah, it's definitely a peacekeeping. I think fawn, the word is so telling. I think you just kind of lay back and you're very much an absorber. You don't want to make any waves. I fawned around my abusive father. So I was always trying to be happy and trying to make him not lose his mood.
Right.
And then when he did lose his mood, I would just go quiet. I knew not to say anything because then you don't know what's going to erupt after that. I would say that the Puff Daddy, P. Diddy, whatever the guy's name is, with Cassie, I was very interested in her case. Such a beautiful girl. She had an age discrepancy. He paid for her car, her apartment, owned her career. Like that is a very exaggerated situation of what coercive control is. But still, even people are like, why didn't she leave? It's like, if you don't get it, it can't help you. Like you're not her. You're not in that scenario. And I think what you said is so important is it erodes away at your authenticity. So what happens with these relationships is like you're losing yourself all the time. So then you have to have the confidence to go make that make sense. Like the math isn't mathing if you're constantly losing yourself, right? And then you finally get courage and you finally get out and then the court isn't on your side either.
And one thing to touch on that too, that's just so important is, again, the insidiousness of it sometimes. Like when Cassie finally did leave and she was dating another gentleman, I forget his name, but he had testified that I think
So
Puff
pretty.
Daddy had blown up his car.
That guy, Kid Cudi? Cutie?
Yeah. So he didn't even do anything to Cassie in that moment, right? It was someone else. So that's him trying to target her support system, her life after him, her ability to move on. Because, Kid Cudi, I think, testified it himself. Like, why would he want to get involved with this if now this guy's blowing up his car? I mean, that's bananas. But things like that will happen. I'll hear stories from people. My ex was outside his house. My ex slashed his tires. My ex called and threatened him. My ex found him on Facebook and sent him a message. That's all intentional. And that's not doing something to the victim. That's doing something to her new network. And that erodes at her world.
It really does. I mean, it even brings up a whole different situation, but like Elizabeth Smart was kidnapped for 9 months. He held her with coercive control. He said, I will kill your family. And then people still said, why didn't you leave? Why didn't you escape? Well, first, let's look at her age. But second, forget her age. I mean, she might not have at any age. If he was willing to come into your own home and take you out of your bed at knife point, at what point would you not believe this man would kill your family? Like, that is what, I mean, I think Diddy threatened to kill her parents and all kinds of things, right? I'm scared for him to get out. I'm scared for her because I feel like these sociopaths get on something. They don't get, just because he didn't get as convicted as we had all hoped, I think, that's a win for him that elevates the ego. And she humiliated him now, right? In that ego. So yeah, I fear for her. This kind of leads into DARVO a little bit, like some of these interpartner violence things. Would you explain DARVO to my following? I know a lot of people are familiar to it, but you might be watching this show for the first time, and I want to make sure that I'm catering to everyone. And you know what? Relearning is always a good thing. So tell us about DARVO.
So DARVO was coined by Jennifer. I don't want to butcher her last name. I want to say it's Freud. And it's a concept where basically if a victim of someone's behavior or abuse comes forward with the abuse allegations, the perpetrator will flip the script. So it's deny, attack, reverse, victim, offender. So it's an acronym for that dynamic, basically. So it's very common in family court. We see it in other dynamics. Obviously, you probably see it and you don't even know what's going on. A new person dates someone and they're like, oh, my ex is crazy. She made up all this stuff about me, or he made up all these things about me. And then 6 months down the road, you find out it's true. You were just a victim of someone DARVOing you or DARVOing the situation.
And a lot of people, even in my community, DARVO this done to them by their own parents, as is in my case. It's everywhere. It's not that they can't hear the truth. It's that they can't handle the truth. They don't want to deal with the truth. They don't want to have to do anything. So they just flip it, right? The thing with court, how does DARVO show up in the court system? Because what I think is the court DARVOs you too on some level, or your attorneys, or the whole system. Can you go into that a little?
So in family court, we see that it's really effective because what it does is it distracts the court and everybody involved from actually what's going on. So let's say, someone goes to court and they're like, well, he's abusive to the kids. And then he or she flips out and starts rattling off all these things that person's done. It's not true. And then, the person that brings forward the allegations is all flustered. They probably don't have a ton of evidence because sometimes evidence like this stuff is hard to get. And then the court is distracted. The lawyers are fighting about things that isn't even the issue that was brought up. And then the can just gets kicked further and further down the road. So it's almost intentionally distracting everybody because then the real issues get pushed aside and they just continue to escalate conflict on other things. And that's what toxic people thrive on as well.
Yeah. And I think that there's a win-lose thing that gets into the court system. And in one of my books, I talk about for a narcissist or a sociopath, psychopath, whatever, there's winning or losing. There was a recent case in family court over a divorce. A grandmother just got arrested. I've been watching this case for 5 years. And when they lose in court, they hired a hitman because there was a relocation issue. The court can bring out the worst of the worst in people who can't lose, right? This one obviously went beyond the court and they all got caught. And I think the mom is going to go next. It's been a really interesting trial to watch. And I watch a lot of family court stuff because it is just a microcosm of how corrupt it is. When I was in my PhD, we were taking a training on the psych of violence, and I was in that course at the time. And they said, make no doubt that people that are divorcing are more cruel to each other than prison inmates of different gangs. And it really struck me. That was such a profound, very bare naked statement. And, it holds to be true because court becomes about winning, and then you lose track with humanity. I think if you get addicted to winning, and narcissists, they win or lose, and they're not going to be a loser. As would be the case of Don Adelson, who had hired a hitman because they lost in court or they weren't winning. Nothing was settled between them yet, except relocation. So tell us about how the court can get into a couple and just amplify the ick, the bad, the abuse.
Yeah, so there's just so many ways, right? So if you have someone that's high conflict, that's what they like to call it. So I just want to be clear, one person can drive conflict in a relationship, in a divorce. So I don't buy into like the two people are high conflict, but that's kind of court language, if you will. So if you have one person in that dynamic that is hell bent on winning or is high conflict, they're going to see family court as just like their magic carpet to cause chaos in the other person's life. And then you get the person, the victim, who has been probably abused for years leading up to the demise of the marriage, who has seen their children, if they have children involved, mistreated. And then they're hell bent on, well, now here's my forum. I really want to prove myself. No, this is wrong, because a lot of victims like see the world in like a justice lens. So that dynamic right there is just prime for the conflict to continue.
God, that's so powerful what you just said. Can you restate that sentence you said about victims see court as a justice system? Can you say that again? Oh, so good.
So you have the victims who finally feel like, I have the strength to leave. I have this attorney. A lot of victims do find sympathetic, empathetic attorneys. And they're like, I'm finally believed. I'm going to get to court. This judge is going to see it, best interest of the kids. So they see the world through this justice lens, which, I don't want people to become jaded, because not all family court is awful. And then you have this person just slinging these crazy false allegations, just like continuing this conflict. And the victim is put at a disadvantage because they really want to prove themselves, and they almost dig their heels in, not in a bad way to drive conflict, but in a way to really try to prove their case and like get the justice and feel like they're validated. And then you just have this conflict that is just, it's like gasoline on a fire.
Yeah. And I love that you're pointing that out, is when you've been fawning and conditioned and indoctrinated to fawn, and then all of a sudden you dig your heels in, you are immediately considered high conflict by the court, which is insane. There's a big difference between telling your truth and standing for yourself against abuse than just using the court as a playground. What would you say to those cases? Because I've seen quite a bit of this. They've been divorced. It's all finalized. Everything's settled out. And then all of a sudden, they bring it back to court because now they don't like this financial document or this financial document. It's almost like a way of just holding someone a prisoner. And are there any measures of where the court just finally goes, enough is enough? Because it doesn't seem like there's ever an end date.
Yes and no. It depends. And this is where I work with a lot of clients now on like that long-term strategy. Like, how can you get to that point where the court where you won't live and die in family court, right? And all your money isn't going to your lawyer's kids' education and not your own. So it depends. But that's kind of most of my story. Like, we divorced essentially in 13 months. It wasn't really that high of a conflict. There was a little bit of motion practice and back and forth, but it wasn't this crazy case that was dragging on for years and years. It was after the settlement. My ex was just continuously going back to court for more and more time with the kids, not because he wanted it, more so just to really stick it to me and punish me. So this is where it gets tricky. And again, it's like so case specific, but sometimes third parties will help, but that's such a slippery slope. So you have to be careful. If you are I will say this, if you're in a divorce and you see the writing on the wall and your lawyer's like, this is probably going to be a problem, or you're fighting over every single document, every single thing, I would try to work with your attorney to get some sort of alternate conflict resolution path in your divorce that's already outlined so that you at least kind of know what you're up against. And it can't just be like a free for all that you can go file motions for any little thing. Maybe it's a mediator.
Mhm.
Again, a PC is a very slippery slope, but if your lawyer knows one that's really good, it may be worth getting it in your judgment of divorce or MSA, because then at least you almost have like a back door. It's like a safety net. Like, okay, if God forbid crap hits the fan, this is my pathway, because there's nothing you can't. This is where radical acceptance for me, this is where I talk to a lot of people about. I don't talk about radical acceptance as you just have to accept what's going on and her treating you badly or whatever.
No, that's not
You
it.
have to, no, you have to accept that this is who you're divorcing and this is the situation you're in. So what is the best toolkit that you can get implemented to help you along the way? It's probably not going to be one that you like, but that's the reality.
When you say PC, I'm that's a parenting coordinator, just so that the listeners know. What's an MSA?
Just basically your global settlement. So there's a lot of different words: global settlement, marriage settlement agreement, judgment of divorce, all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the scary thing, is there's no limits. It seems like they can just bring you back like what was happening to you for more custody, or they want your taxes every year, see if they can get more money. It's just so gross. And I feel like because it's such a free for all, it really curries favor to that narcissist. I always tell the people that I've worked with, you really have to figure out, are you fighting over something that's important, or are you so defensive and so self-protective that you feel like you have to fight for this because he's fighting you on it? Like, what pieces can we let go? What pieces do you what are your bottom lines? I think that you really got to find your bottom lines. Fighting over stuff, things, money, depending on how much you're getting. If you're really getting robbed, that's one thing. But one thing that's happening in a divorce that's going through my office right now is she was the primary provider and he was the stay at home. And so she doesn't want to pay for anything for him because she had an affair on him. And so she just changed jobs. They signed an agreement and she just changed jobs that brings her income down. Well, that's kind of difficult to get away with at some point because they see this all the time, but this is what these people do. And then they sign it. They use these apps like My Family Wizard or whatnot, and they'll document anything that makes you look bad in there and then text you outside of there, save everything. You talk a lot about documentation. So this is a good lead into that. When I got divorced, I documented every single thing, and it did serve me. It did serve me. Especially on one really sticky issue, because I documented, it did serve me and I did win that one thing. He still got way more than I thought that he deserved, but I had to find out also, I didn't want to put my kid through a lot of stuff, and that's her dad. I can't change that. But we didn't have a very high conflict divorce, to be honest. So let's talk about documenting. Why is that so important for if you're in this situation?
So family court is so emotional, right? And back to the justice mind of a lot of victims. They go in this and you have to really, I like what you said, you have to separate. Are you fighting for justice and just being validated, or are you fighting for something that is a dire need?
Are you just so triggered, right? Because sometimes we're human beings. I was so triggered through my divorce because my ex is very, very smart. And he's really good at playing the victim. And he was so neglectful of my daughter. It was scary. I thought, oh my God, someone's going to kidnap her, and I was scared. He's just an irresponsible person. He would forget to feed her because he was playing video games, wouldn't feed her. It'd be 2 a.m. My daughter's starving, calling me, crying, all the things. It was rough. And we weren't that high conflict, right? So he moved an hour away without telling anybody. So now I'm forced to drive 30 minutes to drop her off. Anything he could do to inconvenience my life, he did. And I had to just be I have to suck it up and fucking drive. It's in the best interest of my kid. If I just sit here and fight over why it's unfair that I have to drive when he never informed anyone he was moving, but I had to suffer because of that. right? But it was worthy because that's not a big deal. I got 70%, he got 30%. Because he moved that far away. I mean, you can't be a dad if you're an hour and 20 minutes away from your kid. And so I just had to nurture her on the way back, right? When she'd need like 20, 48 hours just to detox from there. But I do think it's really scary. I documented everything that's life-saving. So go
Yes.
into that. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, it's okay. So family court's so emotional, and that's the problem. And I do kind of put the onus of this on a lot of these lawyers because lawyers are very in family court motion happy. They just love motion practice. First of all, it's incredible. Yes, it's
Really?
incredibly time consuming. It's a lot of billable hours, but you can't just file a motion willy nilly and expect the court. At the end of the day, yes, it's not a jury trial. You're not getting that in family court, but there's still a judge. It's a bench trial. So,
No.
like, we need to be cognizant of that. I think as litigants become more informed, maybe they'll be more informed litigants and bring better, stronger cases to family court. But that whole, you don't like and file a motion really needs to stop. So I tell people, listen, you're up against some jackass that's going to go in there and say, I don't like the color of her hair, so I don't want my kids to see her. You have to be on the other end of that, someone completely different who goes in with evidence-based concerns and solution focused and resolution oriented. This is a problem my family's having. Here's the proof. And whatever proof you think you need, double it. And then here's what I'm thinking will help us. And I also tell people, don't file motions or don't expect the court to do these like far reaching changes. You're not going to go from like 50-50 custody to zero time sharing. That's just not realistic unless obviously if there's some tragic incident or physical abuse or something. But if, he's neglectful, like you experience, maybe you go in and you just ask the court, we need to limit during the week parenting time. Her schooling's really impacted. Here are the problems I'm seeing. Like reasonable always wins 9 times out of 10.
No.
And you need that documentation to back you up, right? And again, I get into all sorts of like healthy debates with people about this because I'll hear a lot of people say, well, I'm scared. What if it's discoverable? Or what if my documentation is this? Or what if I'm like, first of all, it's civil court. Everything's discoverable. But like, what is the alternative? You don't have any proof and you live like this forever? I mean, you have to document.
We shouldn't fear facts.
Right. If you look at criminal court, again, different beast, different burden, all that. But like, I always tell people, listen to like, I don't know, 2020, anything. Sometimes prosecutors take years to build a case. They have to get the evidence. Sometimes you literally have to put yourself in that mindset. 2 years, you did your due diligence.
I did.
In the interim, is it hell? Is it horrible? Are you probably like crying daily because of how your kid is getting treated or how you're getting treated? Maybe, and that sucks. And that I wish I could take away for people, but you're still building a case. Like I got to find divorce in 2016. So for 4 solid years, I was building evidence before we went for the forensic eval. And in the interim, there was a ton of nonsense that went on. But I needed all of that time to really have the strong like foundation of evidence that I had when I finally went for that. And that's when I saw far-reaching change.
Yeah, I did. I documented diligently for 2 years and we had to go back to court because he moved. He moved an hour and a half away. Like, I mean, how are you going to do? We had a custody schedule that he could not do if he lived an hour and a half away, right? So we went back and I documented his tardiness because I was always now having to use childcare because he moved so far away. But he was an hour late, bare minimum, every time. Well, then my babysitters have other jobs they have to go to. So now I'm like stressing out because I feel responsible for their next job. He's an adult. He should be on time. So I documented my babysitters kept documentation. And it turned into, because we're in California, so traffic, but you can use it as an always issue, right? If you leave early enough, you'll get anywhere on time. And you should be on time for your kids because him being late, I would have to stay an hour after work when I'd seen 10 patients. I'm done. I want to go home. So it turned into he got to be 15 minutes late to a drop off. If he didn't show up within those 15 minutes, I could leave and go home, and he'd have to drop her off to me at my house. If he was 15 minutes late from a pickup after his hour and 20-minute drive, he didn't get to take her. So he didn't think I would follow through on it. And I did, because that's what our stipulation said. I couldn't believe I won that. And the only reason I won it, and it might not seem like a big deal to other people that it was tardiness, but it affected everybody and everything and the mood of the pickup. When you're done with work, the horse, it just wants to go home. No one wants to sit and wait on an irresponsible person for an hour, and it was not good. And it was the way he controlled me. And the way that he was able to get me to be mad at pickup or drop off to make me look bad to my daughter and to make him look like this good guy. So she figured out later, because he was late to pick her up all the time as she aged. And she's like, I'm not important to this guy. I mean, those are her words. And that's how that makes people feel. So it's really the only thing I really won. But if I hadn't documented, Courtney, I would never have been able to get that. And it did serve me. And honestly, he ended up being a lot more on time, because I would follow through. And boy, did it make him mad. I mean, it was scary making him mad like that. But it's like, why am I suffering and allowing him to have all this control over me? It doesn't feel right to my body.
Yeah, and that's such a nuanced example, but it's something so common. I'm sitting here laughing because I'm thinking of like 5 different clients who the traffic's always an issue. And then I have someone else who's chronically late, and they just put in the same stipulations in their agreement because it impacts everything. It still was work, your personal life. God forbid you have other commitments outside of work.
Right.
It's just not fair. So I also tell people, document the incident and the problems, but then go on to further, when you present it to the court, explain the impact and why it's negatively affecting your family dynamic. And that's when the court will really understand what the problem is. You can't just go in there and say, he's late, an hour late 25 out of 50 times. They're going to be like, okay.
Who cares? Like, yeah, I really, who cares? Like, and that's why, I won something that might seem small, but
it's not.
It's like being in a bad work environment. Like if you're working with someone who you're on a team with and they're never showing up and they're late and they're putting fake meetings onto the calendar, and it incenses you, which he wanted to do. He wanted to do that. That was his way of controlling me and controlling how everything went, was being late like that. And it was so powerful and passive aggressive. I don't think there's anything more difficult to deal with than someone who's passive aggressive. It's that coercive control. It's a little bit unseen, and man, is it powerful.
It is, especially because someone like that, who you're scared to anger, is not a passive person. So he's just an aggressive person. So that these small things that they want to act like, oh, well, I'm not doing that on purpose. Damn well they're doing it on purpose, which is more infuriating, right? So that passive aggressive stuff is definitely like the more covert.
Like even on the timing issue, it's like we're role models for our kids. Being on time is a really important thing to be in life, right? It gains respect. You don't want to waste someone else's time. And then you want to love your child enough to make sure that they get to the places they need to be on time.
He was showing your daughter that his time is more important than yours.
Well, she's not had a relationship with him since 14 because she was getting so tired of being unseen. She's still, to this day, she's 20 now. She'll still tell me stories I haven't heard yet. All I wanted to do is when she got home, she was just off. She wasn't fed. She wasn't washed. She just wasn't taken care of. And she would go play with her little La La Loopsy dolls at the time alone. And I just gave her the space to kind of detox. And I mean, she cried every time I dropped her off. I cried every time on the way home. I tried to make it positive. I did a whole bunch of stuff of like, he can't seem to maintain himself financially. So he was living with a convicted felon that was a family member. But London said that, he was giving her whipped cream. And I'm like, okay, I don't know if he's grooming her. This guy's hiding out in California. He's got a warrant for his arrest in Vegas. So I said to my ex, I go to be with my boyfriend every other weekend. Please, on your custodial weekends, please just stay at my house. There's no room for her. There's no bed for her. Like, and I don't, she's too old to be sleeping with you. Like, and so I did that. And I said, I would like you to pay me a little bit of, he wouldn't replace my food. He wouldn't take out my trash. Like, I think it's a mistake I made, to be honest, in some respect, but my daughter didn't get molested. But nothing I ever did, no being nice, no nothing worked. He never got more responsible. And to this day, he lives at home. I'm 54, he's 55. He's living at home. So, you know, it just is
They
what
don't change.
They don't change. And my daughter will probably have daddy issues, but has them, and she'll work through those. She hasn't had a boyfriend yet. It's really not her priority. She's starting UCI. So we're doing really good over here, but we talk very openly. And that's one thing too. In any divorce, I mean, it'll be talked about for your life, because your kids are going to have memory for life. And as they age and their brain, it's shut down from 15 to 21. And I'm watching her from about 18 to now. She's much more open with me. And we're still dealing with elements of us being married and that divorce. And then when someone's keeping it in court for 10 years, no one can fucking heal.
I know.
You know, it's wild. What positive movement do you see happening? Like, is there ever hope in these situations? Are there movements against this? You can file motions for 1,000 years and hold your ex hostage. Like, what does the future look like, Courtney? What do you think?
That's such a great question. And honestly, I'll just say, I don't know what the future looks like. I wish I had a better answer. But so I will say that there's the language that people are using: coercive control, DARVO, high conflict, litigation abuse. There's a lot of litigation abuse
Mm,
laws pending in states.
good.
Off the top of my head, I don't know if there's any that have passed. I'll have to look that up, only because my mind is swirling right now with all these stats. But um, coercive control is codified, I think, in 7 states. It's not
Woman.
criminalized, but at least it's part of the statute. It's recognized as a form of domestic abuse. So that's a huge step forward. So I think there is change. The problem is, truthfully, what I've found out through just my grassroots lobbying that I've done and the little involvement in legislation, is the judicial branch really doesn't like to be told what to do from the legislative branch. So there's a little bit of a disconnect behind the scenes. Um, and training is a huge obstacle. It's like almost behind a paywall for these judges and the lawyers. So I just attended a training this week that the AFCC did, where it was talking about coercive control as a continuation of domestic abuse. So that was a great training session.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
mentioned in my TED Talk, because there are countries, there's 5 or 6 of them. There may be more since I did my TED Talk today, but that it's illegal. Coercive control is considered illegal.
Yes. Awareness and knowledge is like the first step. And I feel like that's kind of where we're at. And we also have experts like you, thankfully, Laura Richards, Dr. Cochil, all these people who, family court is kind of like the redheaded stepchild of court. It's kind of like seen as like,
Mhm.
whatever. But the more people talk about it that are like broader experts in this field of just abusive dynamics, toxic relationships, and they start to weave in how family court is a weapon of these people, it will just spread awareness, and it won't be this like siloed, ugly thing that's in the corner. And that's really what I try to do when I go talk to legislators or elected officials. Arizona, I don't know if you saw it, and I believe Idaho had the joint committee hearings on family court
Wow, I did not.
and CPS. So it's huge in Arizona. I think it was 3 days. Idaho, I think, was 3 days. So they brought in testimony from litigants across the state. They had even Danielle Pollock from
Mhm.
George Washington Law, and um, unfortunately, Caden's story from Pennsylvania, her mom. They flew to Arizona and they testified. So there is a lot of awareness
Good,
coming. I'm
good.
determined to get the committee hearing in New Jersey so that the elected officials can hear what family court has done to litigants, the cost, the time wasted, what it's done to the kids, all these things, these orders, these reunification camps, which is a
Yes.
whole nother
Oh,
disaster,
yes.
forcing children to have repair therapy or reunification therapy with an abusive parent. And that's really where DARVO comes into play too. They'll sit there and just completely gaslight the kids and say, that never happened.
Yep. I've had 2 kids go through that. They were teenagers and they'd been seeing me for probably 4 years. And their reunification therapist, he was actually fantastic. The dad quit because he said, I don't know what kind of therapy you've had, but you've done great. You know your truth. And dad, of course, had threatened to sue me. And it's in their stipulation that he wouldn't pay for any of my care because I wouldn't do what he wanted me to do. I wouldn't let him bully me.
Right.
And one thing I think needs change is that a lot of parenting coordinators or lawyers will say they're educated in narcissism now. And a couple of my patients now have, because of that, have hired them, and they recognize that they might have been educated somewhat in it, but unless you've really lived with one, that lawyer or parenting coordinator really has no idea the level of sadistic covert behaviors that will go right by them. I think you have to be more than educated in it. My hope is that those attorneys who have really lived through narcissism, like I have with my family and other partners that I chose because I didn't like them if they didn't have a blinking asshole sign over their head forever. I healed that. Married one. And clearly you too have had that experience. I've clearly got a PhD, being educated on it. The 10 symptoms, you need 5 of 10, tells you nothing. Living with one, being raised by one, being married to one. We need more people to become lawyers that have had that experience.
I know. And that's what I say. You can't destroy safe parents in family court. Their resources, their financial resources, their mental resources, their emotional resources, their physical resources, because it says a tremendous impact on your whole body. There's so much research now on how bad stress is for your health.
Oh my gosh.
So
yes.
you can't turn out these victims 10, 12, 15 years later that are completely depleted and deflated and broke and probably have autoimmune diseases now and expect them to be able to go on and go to law school and pass the bar exam. I mean, that's just crazy. That's not fair, right? We're not giving people a good opportunity to rebuild their life. And that's what I really hope one day, that we can kind of hold back just this quicksand that people fall into in family court. There needs to be some sort of assessment, and quite frankly, an assessment for DV dynamics or coercive control dynamics, so that at least there can be some sort of flag on the case, and that should be handled completely differently. Everything should be seen through a domestic violence lens, not a high conflict or they're just fighting lens. And then we really need enforcement and repercussions in family court. That's a huge problem, like you said before.
There's not enough sanctions. They get away with everything, like the woman that, right? Like she's changing her job after, so she doesn't have to pay. It's like that should be sanctioned. That's not okay. You agreed to this. You signed it. Those things should be sanctioned for sure. And I agree with you. And the other thing too that I think is that when you give someone that is a selfish person a place to win, they'll lose everything to win the thing that they want. They'll lose their kids. They'll lose you cannot make sense of this mind. And when you talk about everything should be seen through a DV lens, out here, there is a way to test for all that. You go through what's called the 730 evaluation. It's $12,000. So the problem is these need to be made financially doable. You can lose your whole financial life to this. So many people give up because I had a guy that was really abused. I mean, this woman was probably one of the scariest people to ever come through my practice, to be honest. The way that she manipulated the court here was unlike anything I'd ever seen. He spent $140,000, which he didn't even make that a year. And it was so bad that he gave up custody of his daughter because every time she accused him of domestic violence, which he never did, and he got that dropped. But then every time that she would say he was drunk at pickup, so the police would come and he wasn't drunk. And she got away with all of it and got that kid in. Today posts about deadbeat dads. It is fucking crazy. So this is allowed in this court. Civil court, this is not allowed. In criminal court, this is not allowed.
I know.
So it is crazy. And I think it really needs to be cleaned up. Courtney, this went so fast. I could talk to you actually for hours. I mean, this is
I know.
such a great conversation. What would you leave our listeners with? I mean, I feel like we all have to, I always say I've never done the brave thing bravely. And I do think that sacrifice is part of going through this. Like you said, I documented for 2 years, you documented for 4 years. This is really a test of faith and patience and reason. If you can stay reasonable, I do think that you stay ahead. What would you advise for people?
I tell people all the time that there's no timeline either. I think people put a lot of pressure on themselves and they feel like, well, now I left and now I have to prove this and I have to do this. And, sometimes that almost has, the reverse. It's a negative impact. You're just going to put more pressure on yourself and you're going to start to spiral. Like I waited, like I said, years to really do anything because I needed to rebuild my own emotional strength. I needed to rebuild my financial situation too, because to your point, we did a forensic eval that was over $20,000. It's really costly. Thankfully, I was in the position that we could do that and we had to split it. So it wasn't just me paying for it, and I had an amazing expert that understands coercive control. So it really was what I needed to spend my money on. It was money well spent.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the testing is really impeccable, but your kids go through a lot out here. They have to be tested and interviewed. Yep. And that's the hard part about it.
So it's like, don't put all this pressure on yourself. You don't have to listen to all the noise. It's your life. Like I said, every case is so dynamic. Every case is so no case is cookie cutter. Everyone is different. Every story is different. Every timeline is different. So you have to do it when you're ready. Give yourself some grace. And everyone wants to talk about forgiveness. And that is such a trigger for me. And I always tell people, you don't have to forgive the other person. You need to forgive yourself. You need to forgive yourself for ignoring flags, staying longer than you thought. Stop beating yourself up about all of that. Why? Like you. Why did I let him stay at my house with my child? Well, you really had no other choice. I'm not telling you what to do. Obviously, you're the expert here, but I'm just saying, I always tell my clients, focus on forgiving yourself, forgiving what you did. Maybe you didn't act perfect. Maybe, he sent text messages to the court where you're like, F you, asshole. You know what? It happens. You're human. Own it and move on. There's something to be said in family court, too, for a sense of humility. We are human. They want to see that you're not going to go in there and just act like I'm the perfect parent. I'm doing everything right. And he's the problem or she's the 100% problem. You're human, you make mistakes, you're going there for relief, you're asking for help. You have to be somewhat open to it. You have to kind of play the game a little bit. That doesn't mean that you agree with it. That doesn't mean that you're sitting there condoning it. That doesn't mean that, I had to play the game sometimes. I had experts, I had family therapists.
Right? Choose what's important. That was something that I really think I learned through my divorce processes because he's very petty. And I could get stuck because I married my mom. So there was a lot of triggers for me there because she's very petty. Pettiness is very difficult to deal with. It's very difficult. It's childish. It's provoking. It's triggering. And I just had to bottom line it wait, is that fog or is it important? Right. So I always wrote everything down and then I would revisit. If in 48 hours that was still really important to me, then I would talk to my attorney. One thing too that I personally think could help people is any document I got from my lawyers was written in another fucking language. And I'm like, what does this even heretofore? Just speak to me. I wish that there was a language that could be spoken to the layperson that could help us download these documents in a way that's meaningful. So I think AI might be a good job at doing that. If you get some documents and it's written in some language, because what I would read would spin me up because I didn't fully understand the laws. I'm not a lawyer. I was already emotional. It would end with very truly yours. You're like, what is going on? Right? That languaging to me, it's a game of chess that they're playing, but I don't speak the language. I felt lost in a country where I didn't speak the language in divorce court. So I think with tools like AI now that you can take, I just downloaded all my blood work and I put it into AI. And I think there are things that it's really good for. And one of these things could be take your stipulation and just say, please explain this to me like I'm a human being. That's another thing with divorce court that was challenging for me and for many of my people. I'm like, don't read it or just ask your attorney, right? Because it's a lot of paper.
A lot.
It can wear you out. It can overwhelm you. And some of what's in those papers isn't for you. Try to figure out what's for you and what's not for you. Courtney, I so appreciate you coming on, for reaching out. This is such an important conversation because if we've been raised by toxic families, we do tend to replicate in our marriages. And this is a great way to stop that generational trauma. Be brave. Even when you don't feel it, stand up for yourself, but figure out what's important, right? And like Courtney said, for her own clients, like, be patient, be reasonable, be humble, right? So that is going to be our show for the day. I cannot believe how fast that went. We went a full hour. So Courtney, thank you so, so much. All of her links, all the things, if you really need help, this is someone I think you can talk to and you'll get the reason that you need because you've practiced it, you've lived it, and we appreciate you. We appreciate all the hard work you're doing in this field. You are so special. You are so needed. And we are cheering you on here from the Sherrie audience. So thank you so much. Yes. All right, everyone. Loved having Courtney on. I'm sure you took a lot of notes if you're in this situation. And I love you all to death. And so until next week, be well. Take care of you. Well, Bravehearts, that concludes our amazing Sherrie session for the day. Please sign up on my email list at drsherriecampbell.com so that you can be in touch with me and see what's going on in terms of what I'm offering soon, what books are coming out, etc. Talk to you in a couple of weeks.